Good morning, everyone. I trust that you are all keeping well. Okay, let's try and get this straight. Okay, that's, I think, the best we're going to do under the circumstances. Not quite sure why we are a bit crooked this morning. Anyway, today's learning is dedicated in memory of Shendo Bas Reuven Levi, David Ben Shimon Baum, Zvi Ben Mordechai Bentley. We wish all the families long life, as well as all those that are saying Kaddish. We wish David Bloom long life in particular as he finishes saying Kaddish for his late mother. David, wish you and all the family long life. Good morning to David, to Peter, to Clarice, to Rachel, to Susan, and all those that are still joining us. So we made a start on Ethics of the Fathers. One particular story that always springs to mind when we think about Ethics of the Fathers. Ethics of the Fathers, we've already mentioned. It's something which is, in a nutshell, I think we would refer to it as it's about us being a mensch. It's about us having character traits. It's about us refining our character so that we are, rather than being uncouth or arrogant or obnoxious, but that we are considerate, that we are sensitive, that we are pleasant, that we are caring, etc. So there was a story relating to Professor, what was his name now? It was in the 1940s in City University in New York. Bertrand Russell, famous professor, very smart man. And he was a teacher of ethics in City University. And it was discovered, remember we're in the 1940s, imagine what would happen nowadays, absolutely nothing. But in those days, it was a big deal. It was discovered that he'd acted in an immoral, unethical fashion in his private life. And there were rumors going around. Anyways, they called him before the ethical board. Can you imagine? There were institutions in those days that had an ethical board. And they said to him, Professor Russell, your behavior, your actions, your misconduct, doesn't seem to be very in keeping with you as a lecturer, a teacher, a paragon of virtue and of a teacher of ethics. So without batting an eyelid, Bertrand Russell turned to the board and he said to them, if I was a teacher of maths, you wouldn't expect me to be a parallelogram. So therefore, if I teach ethics, I'm not expected to be ethical. Friends, nothing could be more antithetical than that statement in terms of being Jewish. We are the Torah. We are our values. That is the sum total of a person. What does it mean that we pass? When we pass on our traditions, what are we passing? Books? Yeah. Traditions? Yeah. But hopefully values, principles. So often I attend, sadly, bereavements, and the one word that seems to be sorely lacking is principles, is values, that the person lived for something, stood for something, died for something. What is it? We've got to be that we're living in an eco-friendly, system where we're all worried about the environment. We're worried about the environment. We have to be worried about not just the physical environment, but the spiritual environment. The social environment. What environment are we bringing up our families, our children, the next generation? The world's worried about, will there be a world for our children to live in? We have to plant more trees, we can't have plastic, and so on and so forth. But so often, the environment is also the values, the way we speak, the way we behave, the way we dress, the way we interact. Is there any shame? Is there any expectations? Are we allowed to say anything? Or is it just basically a free-for-all and everyone does and behaves what they want? Sorry for the rant, but this is all part this is all part of what we are talking about, the idea that what we are dealing with in the book of Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot, is about values. It's about the way that we behave. It's about the way that we conduct ourselves, the values we stand for. So therefore, let's go on to the first statement. Haim Amru Shlosha Devarim. So we said that the men of the Great Assembly, now the men of the Great Assembly lived at the period of the destruction of the Second Temple, and therefore it was a critical juncture in Jewish history. We've got to imagine the Jews are going to be scattered over the four corners of the earth, and there was a real danger of our oral tradition being lost, that unbroken chain that we already spoke about yesterday, that something of it would be lost in transmission through the vicissitudes and persecution and subjugation. And therefore they decided to formulate the oral Torah was written down by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, the prayers, which were, at that time there was no official prayer book, and they were the ones that formulated in their great wisdom and in their great understanding and being able to probe the depths of what would be appropriate to connect with the Almighty. If we didn't have a temple, we didn't have temple service, and therefore they came up with the Siddur and organized our prayers, our formal prayers. That's one of many things that they did. Anyways, what were the statements that they said? Shlosha Dvarim. They said three things. Hevim Masunim Badin. So therefore, the idea is that one has to be careful in judgment. You don't rush into judgment, but it's something that's carefully considered. We weigh up. We make sure we've taken into consideration all the matters, all the perspectives, all the consideratory factors before arriving at a judgment. So often we jump and arrive at conclusions. We see something. We see a video. Yeah, the world judged Israel before they even heard any evidence. And think about it. That journalist, what was it, last week? Tragically, she was killed. Yeah, in the crossfire between the Israeli soldiers that were defending against the attacks from the Arabs, and there was it's a tragedy, and we mourn the loss of life of an innocent journalist. But nonetheless, everyone was already considered and judged Israel before the evidence has even been heard. When we're looking at judging people, when we're judging our family, our loved ones, our friends, we're so quick to arrive at conclusions. We are able to be exacting in our interpretation of a WhatsApp, of a text, of a voice note, of a voice message, of the way somebody looks. Did we take into consideration all the factors? The fact that maybe they're going through something, maybe they're not feeling good about themselves, or maybe they weren't particular about the way they wrote it. There's different styles between emails, between WhatsApp, and everyone has their own style. So that's the first thing. One should establish many students. What does it mean by students? It doesn't mean that you have to be a teacher in a school or in a yeshiva or in a SEM. It doesn't mean that at all. Students are people that learn from us, people that emulate us, people that continue to perpetuate what we stand for. So if we are paragons of virtue, if we model the right behavior, then we are able to ensure that we will have students that are able to emulate, to replicate what we are doing. They say that it's not, that values and principles are not taught, but they're caught. It's the way we behave, the way we interact. That is what leaves a lasting impression. And thirdly, we said, v'asu siyag laTorah. With this we'll conclude, that you should make a fence around the Torah. We have many a fence is there to set the boundaries. It's there to protect you if you were to imagine a cliff top. So therefore, you could imagine the dangers. If a child goes too near to the edge, God forbid, they could fall off. And therefore, to protect the biblical legislation, the biblical laws that we have, the Torah mandates, they need protection, because otherwise a person could say, well, I'll just push the boundary, I'm going to, go right up to the boundary, and I'm not going to fall off the edge. Nothing's going to happen. So by having rabbinical fences that we place around it, it's a safety net, the same way that we have fences that are around any types of dangers that we face in life, where we have signs, keep out, danger, etc. So that's the idea. And that's one of the reasons why we have rabbinic legislation to protect us and our families, to ensure that we don't go too near to the edge. So these are the three principles that the men of the Great Assembly were known for. Doesn't mean this is all that they taught or all that they knew, but it means that these are the three critical things that we should learn from them. This is the end of the first Mishnah. Of course, there is so much more to say, but we're trying to keep it concise and to the point every day, and therefore we will stop there. We continue now with Psalm 19, which goes as follows. 23. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He causes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even as I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You set a table before me in the presence of my adversaries. You anointed my head with oil, my cup overflows. May only goodness and kindness pursue me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord for length of days. Memorial prayer. Adon Olamim Zachoes Nishmois. Shana Bas Reuven Levi, David Ben Shimon Baum, Suven Mordechai Bentley, Shalchu Li Olamo, Amana Barachamim, Nazrim Zeta Kanapech Li Olamim, Vesuchai Seshua Samay Nocham Mishkot Sam Beshalom, V'Noimar Amen. Long life wishes to all. For Shlema lastly. Mi Shaberach Avzein Ramis Rav Yaakov, Moshe Shlomo Shabbat Yivarach Pesach Cholim. Bavu Shana Mispalim Bavu Rabbis Chakadol Bro Biz Chazakash Baruchim Alerachim Alehem Lachmo Vosam Vishlach Lemafushem Meshamal Cholvim Mesoshach Yisora Fus Nefesh Fusagu Hashtabak Zmakariv and Omar Amen. It's worth us start thinking, what is it if there were 2 or 3 things that we wanted to be remembered for or remembered by? What would they be? You ever written a will? Not only talking about a financial will, but you're meant to write also a spiritual will, an heirloom to betroth to the next generation. What is it that if there's 2 or 3 things we want our kids, our grandchildren, to take with them, to remember us by, to continue, what is it that would be? What's our legacy? I'm not asking for answers, but it's something I'm thinking about now, and it's something we should all think about. Have a great day. Please God, we'll see you tomorrow. Take